The picture on the wall. Chapter 1. My daughter always said I worried too much. Maybe she was right. But 72 years of living teaches you to notice the things people try to hide, the silences that speak louder than words. The apartment building loomed before me, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. So different from the small house where I raised my children, where the walls knew every laugh and tear. I adjusted my worn handbag and pushed through the revolving door, my reflection fracturing into a dozen pieces in the mirrored lobby. Grandma. Little Tommy's voice echoed through the hallway as I stepped off the elevator. He crashed into my legs, his small arms wrapping around me tight. 6 years old and still believed the world was good. There's my sweet boy. I knelt down, my knees protesting, and cupped his face. Have you been good for Mommy? I'm always good, he said, grinning with that gap where his front tooth used to be. Mom, thank you so much for coming. My daughter Sarah appeared in the doorway. Beautiful, successful Sarah, with her tailored blazer and perfect makeup. But I saw what others didn't: the concealer that couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes, the way her smile didn't reach past her lips. I gathered my overnight bag and followed them inside. The apartment was exactly as I remembered from my last visit 3 months ago. Spotless. Cold. The kind of place where you were afraid to touch anything. Modern furniture that looked expensive but uninviting. Abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my entire living room. Richard had to leave early for a business trip, Sarah said, her voice too bright, too rehearsed. He said to tell you hello. I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. Richard. My son-in-law with his expensive suits and careful words. Always polite, always distant, like there was a wall of ice between him and the rest of humanity. The guest room is ready. Tommy's been so excited you're staying with us for a few days. She moved through the apartment with quick, nervous energy, straightening things that were already straight. Grandma, want to see my new toys? Tommy tugged at my hand. In a moment, sweetheart. Let Grandma catch her breath first. As Tommy ran off, I set my bag down and really looked at my daughter. She was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, her back to me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Sarah. She didn't turn around. How are you? Really? I'm fine, Mom. Just busy. Work's been crazy, and Tommy's school activities, and Richard's clients. The words tumbled out like they'd been prepared, rehearsed for anyone who asked. I walked closer. Sweetheart, look at me. She turned, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Exhaustion? But then the mask was back, that perfect smile. I'm fine, she repeated. You know me, always running around. I should get going soon. I have a client meeting at 7. At 7 in the evening? Yes, well, he's flying to Tokyo tomorrow, so. She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Tommy's bedtime is 8:30. His pajamas are in the second drawer. I know where his pajamas are. I've stayed here before. Right. Of course. She kissed Tommy goodbye, gave me a quick hug that felt more like a brush against my shoulder, and she was gone. The apartment felt even quieter after the door closed. Tommy was already dragging out his toy cars, lining them up on the coffee table in precise rows. I settled into the stiff leather couch and watched him play, but my mind was elsewhere. Something was wrong. A mother knows. Chapter 2. Grandma, you're not watching. Tommy's voice pulled me back. I am, darling. Show me again. He demonstrated how his remote control car could do flips, his face glowing with pride. I laughed and clapped, and for a while, I let myself forget the unease settling in my stomach. We ate dinner together. The lasagna was good, though clearly from an expensive restaurant, not made in Sarah's kitchen. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her actually cook. When I raised her and her brother, we didn't have money for takeout. We made do. We made memories around a worn kitchen table. Time for bath, mister, I announced when the clock struck 7. Ah, 5 more minutes? Nice try. Come on. He giggled and ran toward the bathroom, and I followed, grateful for the simple joy of a child's laughter in this too-perfect apartment. After his bath, wrapped in a fluffy towel and smelling of bubble bath, Tommy led me to his room. It was exactly what you'd expect, every toy organized in its place, educational posters on the walls, a bookshelf full of books arranged by height. Even a 6-year-old's room felt designed, curated. Which story tonight? I asked, settling into the chair beside his bed. The one about the dragon and the knight. I pulled the familiar book from the shelf and began to read, putting on different voices for each character the way I used to do for Sarah when she was small. Tommy's eyes grew heavy, his breathing slow and steady. "Grandma," he mumbled, half asleep. "Yes, sweetheart? I love when you visit. You make everything warmer." My throat tightened. "I love visiting you, too. Daddy says you're old-fashioned." His voice was drowsy, innocent. "What does that mean?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "It means I remember when things were different. When people talked to each other more, I suppose." "Oh." He yawned. "I like old-fashioned." I kissed his forehead and pulled the blanket up to his chin. "Sweet dreams, my darling boy." "Grandma? Sometimes Daddy talks to me about secrets. He says big boys can keep secrets." Something cold slithered down my spine. What kind of secrets? But he was asleep, his breathing deep and even. I sat there for a long moment, watching him sleep, that child's innocent face. What kind of secrets did a father share with a 6-year-old? I told myself I was overthinking. I stood and walked quietly to the door, glancing back once more at Tommy before turning off the light. The apartment was too quiet. I made myself a cup of tea in the spotless kitchen, everything in its place, everything sterile. I thought of my own kitchen, with its chipped mugs and the stain on the counter that never quite came out. That kitchen had life in it. I carried my tea to the living room and sank into the couch. The walls were covered with photos, professional ones, the kind where everyone wears coordinating outfits and smiles on cue. Sarah and Richard's wedding, Tommy's baby pictures, family portraits against neutral backgrounds. One photo caught my eye. It was of me, actually taken last Christmas. I was holding Tommy, both of us laughing at something off camera. It was candid, real. The only photo in this entire apartment that looked like life instead of performance. It hung by itself on the far wall, away from the other carefully arranged clusters. I walked over to it, remembering that day. We'd been making cookies, and Tommy had gotten flour everywhere. Richard had been annoyed by the mess. Sarah had been anxious, cleaning as we went. But for a few hours, in my little house, they'd relaxed. They'd been real. I reached out and straightened the frame. It was slightly crooked. As my hand touched it, something felt odd. The wall behind it seemed different, hollow, maybe? I pressed gently, and could have sworn I felt the slightest give. "Don't be ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "You're imagining things." But I couldn't shake the feeling. Chapter 3. Sarah came home close to midnight. I was still awake, reading in the guest room, when I heard her key in the lock. I set down my book and went to the doorway. "You're still up?" She looked exhausted, older than her 43 years. "Couldn't sleep. How was your meeting?" "Fine. Good." She kicked off her heels and rubbed her wrist absently. "Let me make you some tea." "Mom, you don't have to." "I want to." In the kitchen, I put the kettle on while Sarah slumped at the counter, her head in her hands. This was the moment, I thought. This was when I could reach her, when her defenses were down. "Sweetheart, talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about." "Sarah." I kept my voice gentle. "I'm your mother. I know when something's wrong." She looked up at me, and for a second I saw my little girl again, the one who used to run to me with every scraped knee and broken heart. I'm just tired, she whispered. It's more than that. She stood abruptly, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. I should get to bed. Thanks for watching, Tommy. Sarah. Good night, Mom. She was gone before the kettle even boiled. I stood alone in that perfect kitchen, surrounded by stainless steel and granite, and felt more helpless than I had in years. Chapter 4. The next morning, Sarah was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the counter, had to go in early. Back by dinner. Help yourself to anything. Tommy and I spent the day together. We went to the park, got ice cream, drew pictures. Normal things. Happy things. But I couldn't stop thinking about the night before, about the worry in Sarah's eyes, about Tommy's mention of secrets. Grandma, push me higher. Tommy squealed from the swing. I obliged, watching him soar into the air, laughing without a care. Children should always be this way, I thought. Free. Unafraid. Look how high I am. I can see everything. Hold on tight. When we got back to the apartment that afternoon, Tommy wanted to play hide and seek. I was tired, but I couldn't say no to him. You count, Grandma. Count to 50. I covered my eyes and counted slowly, hearing his little feet padding around the apartment, his giggles barely suppressed. 48. 49. 50. Ready or not, here I come. I found him in the first obvious place behind the living room curtains, his shoes sticking out at the bottom. Found you. One more time. But I'll hide better. We played 3 more rounds. On the last one, I found him in the study, Richard's study, a room I'd been told was off limits. Tommy was crouched behind Richard's large desk, trying to make himself small. Got you, sneaky boy. He jumped up, laughing. This is my best hiding spot. Daddy lets me hide here sometimes when we play games. I glanced around the study. It was as immaculate as the rest of the apartment. Leather-bound books on the shelves, though I doubted they'd ever been read. A massive desk with nothing on it except a laptop and a pen holder. Filing cabinets against one wall. Does Daddy work in here a lot? Sometimes. He has important papers. Tommy said it the way children do, parroting what they've heard. He says I can't touch anything. But we play games here. What kind of games? Color games. I have to remember colors in order. Red, yellow, blue, green. Like that. Daddy says I'm really good at remembering. A color game. It seemed innocent enough, but something about it nagged at me. That sounds like fun. And he gives me treats when I remember right. Tommy ran out of the study, already moving on to the next thing. I followed more slowly, glancing back at the room. Why would Richard play memory games with Tommy in his office? Why colors in sequence? Stop it, I told myself. You're being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Chapter 5. That night, after Tommy was asleep, I couldn't settle. Sarah had texted that she'd be late again, another client dinner. I wandered the apartment, restless. I found myself standing in front of my photograph again. The one of me and Tommy, laughing. I reached out and touched the frame, and again I felt it, that slight give in the wall behind it. I looked around. I was alone. Tommy was asleep. Sarah wouldn't be home for hours. I carefully lifted the photo off its hook. The wall behind it looked normal at first. Just white paint, same as the rest. But when I ran my fingers across it, I could feel the faintest seam, a rectangular outline, almost invisible. My heart began to beat faster. I pressed gently, and a small panel shifted, just barely. It wasn't loose. It was designed to move. I quickly hung the photo back up and stepped away, my hands shaking. What was I doing? This was my daughter's home. I had no right to go snooping through walls. But then I thought of Sarah's haunted eyes. Of Tommy saying Daddy shared secrets. Of that bruise on Sarah's wrist that she'd tried to hide. I went to the kitchen and made myself chamomile tea, trying to calm my nerves. The apartment felt different now, like it was watching me. Like it had secrets in its walls and shadows. I was being ridiculous. I was an old woman letting her imagination run wild. But I couldn't forget that seam in the wall. Chapter 6. Tommy had a nightmare that night. I woke to his crying and hurried to his room, finding him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face. Shish, it's okay. Grandma's here. I gathered him into my arms, feeling his little body tremble. I had a bad dream, he sobbed. I know, sweetheart. Want to tell me about it? He shook his head against my chest. I rocked him gently, humming an old lullaby I used to sing to Sarah. Grandma? Yes, baby? The picture has to stay where it is. Daddy said so. He said it's very important. I went very still. What picture? Your picture. The one of you and me. Daddy said it has to always stay right there on the wall. He checks it every night. My mouth went dry. Why does Daddy check it? I don't know. He just does. He touches it and makes sure it's straight. Tommy yawned, already growing sleepy again. Blue comes first. Then the other colors. That's how Daddy taught me. Blue first, I repeated softly. What comes after blue, sweetheart? Green, red, yellow, he murmured, his eyes closing. Daddy says I'm the best at remembering. I held him until his breathing evened out, until he was deeply asleep again. Then I carefully laid him back down and pulled the covers up. Blue, green, red, yellow. A color sequence. Behind the picture that had to always stay in place. The picture that Richard checked every night. I walked back to the living room, to that photograph on the wall. In the dim light from the hallway, I stared at it. What are you hiding, Richard? Chapter 7. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the guest room, watching the hours creep by on the clock, my mind racing. At 6 in the morning, I heard Sarah come home. I heard her shower, heard her moving quietly through the apartment, trying not to wake anyone. At 7, she knocked softly on my door. Mom? You awake? Come in, sweetheart. She opened the door, already dressed for work, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. But I could see the exhaustion beneath it all. I'm sorry about last night. The dinner ran late, and then I had to. Sarah, sit down. Please. I really need to get going. Sit down. Something in my voice made her obey. She perched on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting together in her lap. What's going on? I asked quietly. Nothing, I just. Don't lie to me. I reached out and gently took her wrist, the one I'd seen her rubbing. I pushed up her sleeve. The bruise was darker now. 4 distinct marks. Fingerprints. She jerked her hand back, pulling the sleeve down. It's nothing. I bumped into something. Sarah. Mom, please. Don't what? Don't see what's right in front of me? Don't care that my daughter is hurt? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. You don't understand. Everything is fine. Richard is just under a lot of stress with work, and I'm clumsy sometimes, and... Stop. I took both her hands in mine. Stop making excuses for him. She pulled away and stood, wrapping her arms around herself. You don't know what you're talking about. Richard is a good man. He provides for us. This apartment, Tommy's school, everything we have. I don't care about the apartment. Well, I do. I care that my son has opportunities I never had. I care that we're not scraping by, worrying about every penny like when I was growing up. Her voice broke. I care that I finally have the life I always wanted. At what cost? She stared at me, and I saw it all there in her eyes, the fear, the shame, the desperate need to believe the lie she'd been telling herself. I have to go to work, she whispered. Sarah, please, Mom, just watch Tommy today. I'll be home early tonight. We can talk then. She left before I could say another word. Chapter 8. Tommy woke up cheerful and chatty, blessedly unaware of the storm brewing around him. We had breakfast together, cereal and orange juice. Simple things. Grandma, can we go to the museum today? We'll see, sweetheart. Maybe this afternoon. Okay. He swung his little legs under the table. I like when you visit. Mommy and Daddy are always so busy. They work very hard. Yeah. He pushed his cereal around with his spoon. Sometimes they fight. I kept my voice casual. All parents disagree sometimes. Not disagree. Fight. Daddy yells, and Mommy cries. He said it matter-of-factly, the way children do when something has become normal to them. But then Daddy says sorry and brings her flowers, and she smiles again. My heart ached. That must be scary for you. He shrugged. I go in my room and play the color game in my head. Blue, green, red, yellow. Blue, green, red, yellow. It helps me not hear. I reached across and brushed his hair back from his forehead. This sweet, innocent child, using a memory game to drown out his parents fighting. After breakfast, while Tommy was watching cartoons, I found myself drawn back to the study. I stood in the doorway, looking at Richard's perfect domain. Color games, important papers, a picture that had to stay in place. I walked to the filing cabinets. They were locked. Of course they were. I opened the desk drawers, carefully, quietly. Nothing unusual. Office supplies, business cards, a checkbook. I was about to close the last drawer when I noticed something, a small trash can tucked beneath the desk. I pulled it out. It was mostly empty, except for some shredded paper at the bottom. I reached in and pulled out a handful of the strips. They'd been through a shredder, cut into thin ribbons. But something about them caught my eye. They were in different colors. Blue strips, green strips, red, yellow. My hands started to shake. I gathered all the shredded pieces and brought them to the dining table, away from where Tommy sat watching his shows. I began trying to piece them together like a jigsaw puzzle, matching colors, looking for anything that made sense. It was slow work. The strips were tiny, and my old eyes weren't what they used to be. But gradually, patterns emerged. Numbers, what looked like account information. Names I didn't recognize. And at the top of one, reconstructed blue piece, offshore holdings. Chapter 9. I must have spent 2 hours at that table, piecing together fragments. Tommy came over once, curious, but I told him Grandma was working on a puzzle and sent him back to his cartoons with a snack. The fuller picture that emerged was damning. Bank account numbers, lists of transactions, names that seemed like they might be shell companies. Everything color-coded: blue for accounts, green for transfers, red for what looked like falsified documents, yellow for contacts or clients. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking at, but I knew it was illegal. This was Richard's real work. This was why he had money for this expensive apartment, for Tommy's private school, for everything. And Sarah, did she know? I thought of her defensive words that morning, her insistence that Richard provided everything. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she'd convinced herself not to ask questions. I carefully gathered all the paper strips and tucked them into my handbag. Evidence. I might need evidence. Then I walked to the living room, to my photograph on the wall. I glanced at Tommy, still absorbed in his show. I carefully lifted the picture off its hook again and examined the wall panel behind it. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see it clearly. A small safe, embedded in the wall. The seam outlined a panel about 8 inches square. There was no visible lock, no handle. Just a smooth surface. I pressed it gently, and a faint digital display lit up, barely visible. It was waiting for a code. A color code. Blue, green, red, yellow. Tommy's color game. The sequence he'd been taught to memorize. Richard had trained his own son to remember the combination to his hidden safe. I hung the picture back up quickly and stepped away, my heart pounding. What was in that safe? More documents? Cash? Something worse? I knew what I should do. I should call the police. I should tell them what I'd found. But would they believe an old woman with some shredded paper and a suspicion? Would they act fast enough? Would they protect Sarah and Tommy if Richard found out I'd reported him? I needed to be sure. I needed to know what was in that safe. Chapter 10. That afternoon, I took Tommy to the park as promised. We fed ducks, we played on the swings, we got ice cream. Normal things. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities, weighing options. "Grandma, you're quiet," Tommy observed, licking his chocolate cone. "Just thinking, sweetheart." "About what?" "About how much I love you." He grinned, chocolate on his chin. "I love you too, Grandma. More than ice cream." I laughed despite everything. "That's a lot of love." "I know." When we got back to the apartment, Sarah still wasn't home. Another text running late. "Order dinner for you and Tommy." Sorry. I made Tommy dinner simple pasta with butter, the way he liked it. As I watched him eat, chattering about the ducks we'd seen, I made my decision. Tonight, after everyone was asleep, I would open that safe. It was a terrible idea. I could get caught. I could make everything worse. But I thought of Sarah's bruises, of Tommy's innocent face, of the shredded evidence of crimes. Someone had to protect this family. Even if it meant doing something risky. Even if it meant my daughter might hate me for it. Chapter 11. Richard came home that night. I heard his key in the lock around 9 o'clock. I'd been reading in the living room, and my whole body tensed at the sound. He walked in, setting down his briefcase, loosening his tie. When he saw me, his expression didn't change, that same smooth, polite mask he always wore. "Margaret, I didn't realize you were still here. Sarah asked me to stay through the weekend." "I see." He walked to the kitchen, and I heard him pouring himself a drink. "How's Tommy?" "Asleep. He had a good day." Richard returned to the living room with a glass of whiskey and sat in the chair across from me. We'd never been alone together like this before. Sarah had always been there, a buffer between us. "You know," he said conversationally, "Sarah worries that you don't approve of me." "I don't know you well enough to approve or disapprove." "Fair enough." He sipped his drink, studying me with those cold eyes. "You come from a different generation. Different values. I respect that." "Do you?" "Of course. Family is important." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I work very hard to provide for my family. Everything I do for them." "Everything?" Something flickered across his face just for a moment. Then the smooth mask was back. "You must be tired. Long day with a 6-year-old. "I'm fine. Still, don't let us keep you up." It wasn't a suggestion. I stood, gathering my book. "Good night, Richard. Good night, Margaret." As I walked past him toward the guest room, I felt his eyes on my back. Cold, calculating. He knew. Somehow, he knew I was a threat. I closed the guest room door and leaned against it, my heart racing. I couldn't do this tonight. Not with Richard home. It was too dangerous. But then I heard them raised voices from the master bedroom. Richard and Sarah, fighting. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard Sarah's voice rise in protest, heard Richard's sharp, angry response. Then I heard something crash. And Sarah crying. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The fighting had stopped. Now there was just silence, thick and terrible. I wanted to knock on their door. I wanted to demand to know if Sarah was okay. But I knew what would happen. Richard would answer with that smooth smile. Sarah would appear, makeup covering whatever new bruises she'd received, and tell me everything was fine. I stood in that hallway, helpless, as tears streamed down my face. Chapter 12. I must have finally fallen asleep around 2 in the morning. I woke with a start at 4, the room dark around me. I lay there, listening. The apartment was silent. This was my chance. I slipped out of bed, pulling a cardigan over my nightgown. I moved through the dark apartment on bare feet, careful not to make a sound. In the living room, I could see the faint glow of the city through the windows. I went to my photograph on the wall and carefully lifted it down, setting it on the couch. The hidden panel glowed faintly when I pressed it. The digital display appeared 4 colored squares. Blue, green, red, yellow. Tommy's game. The sequence he'd memorized. I took a deep breath. If I was wrong about the code, an alarm might sound. Richard might wake up. This could all end very badly. But I had to know. I pressed the blue square. It lit up. A soft beep, barely audible. I pressed green. Another beep. Red. The third beep. Yellow. There was a soft click, and the panel swung open. Inside was a safe, maybe 7 inches deep. And it was full. Stacks of cash, hundreds of dollars, maybe tens of thousands. Passports, I counted 4 of them, different names, but Richard's photo in each. Hard drives, USB sticks, and papers, lots of papers. I pulled out one of the documents. Even in the dim light, I could make out enough falsified tax documents, shell corporation registries, bank transfers to offshore accounts. Richard wasn't just committing fraud. He was running a sophisticated criminal operation. Looking for something? I spun around. Richard stood in the hallway, silhouetted against the faint light. He was still fully dressed. He hadn't been asleep at all. He'd been waiting. Chapter 13. My voice came out as a croak. It's fine, Margaret. Richard walked toward me slowly, calmly. I understand curiosity, especially at your age, when there's not much else to occupy your time. Richard, please, let me speak. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, utterly relaxed. You've discovered my private documents. Very private documents. And now we have a problem. I'm calling the police. Are you? He tilted his head. With what evidence? Some papers you stole from my wall safe? Papers you accessed by breaking into my home security system? I didn't break in. I'm a guest here. A guest who invaded my privacy, who snooped through my personal belongings, who cracked my safe. He smiled. Who do you think the police will believe? A respected businessman, or a paranoid old woman with a history of? He gestured vaguely. Instability? I'm not unstable, aren't you? Sarah's told me about your episodes. The confusion, the paranoia. She's been so worried about you. He was lying. He had to be. But doubt crept in. What if Sarah had said those things? What if she was so deep in his control that she'd helped him build this narrative against me? Sarah will tell them the truth. Will she? Richard moved closer. Sarah has a comfortable life. A beautiful home. A son in the best schools. She won't jeopardize that. She won't choose you over her family's security. I'm her family. You're her past. I'm her future. He reached past me and calmly began putting items back into the safe. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget what you saw here tonight. You're going to go back to bed, and in the morning, you're going to leave. You'll tell Sarah you're not feeling well, and you need to go home. And if I don't? He closed the safe and pressed the panel shut, the seam disappearing back into the wall. Then I'll have to take steps to protect my family. Legal steps. I have lawyers, Margaret. Good ones. They can have you declared incompetent. They can make sure you never see Tommy again. The threat hung in the air between us. You would do that, to protect my family? Without hesitation. He hung my photograph back on its hook, straightening it carefully. You have until morning to decide. Choose wisely. He walked away, back toward the master bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the dark. Chapter 14. I didn't go back to bed. I couldn't. I sat on the couch in the living room, wrapped in my cardigan, watching the sky slowly lighten through the windows. What was I supposed to do? If I went to the police, Richard would claim I was senile, delusional. He'd turn Sarah against me. He'd take Tommy away from me. I'd be painted as the crazy old woman who couldn't accept that her daughter had moved on, moved up in the world. But if I did nothing, I'd be leaving Sarah and Tommy in the hands of a criminal. A man who hit his wife. A man who was teaching his 6-year-old son to memorize criminal codes disguised as games. I thought of my own mother, long gone now. She'd been a strong woman, stubborn and fierce. She'd fled her home country with nothing but the clothes on her back and 2 small children. She'd worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She'd never backed down from a fight, especially when her children were threatened. "What would you do, Mama?" I whispered into the dark. But I knew what she'd do. She'd fight, no matter the cost. At 6 in the morning, I heard Sarah getting ready for work. I waited until she was in the kitchen before I joined her. She looked terrible, even the makeup couldn't hide the new bruise on her cheekbone. "Mom." She sounded surprised to see me up so early. "I thought you'd sleep in." "Sarah, we need to talk. I have to get to work. Please. 5 minutes. She sighed but nodded, pouring herself coffee with shaking hands. I sat down at the counter. This was it, my last chance to reach her. "I know what Richard does," I said quietly. "I know how he makes his money." She went very still. "What are you talking about?" "The safe, Sarah. Behind my picture. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fraud." You went through our things?" Her voice rose. "How dare you? This is our home. He's a criminal. He's my husband. He hits you." She set down her coffee cup so hard it sloshed onto the counter. "Get out, Sarah. Get out of my house. Now." Tears streamed down her face. "You have no right. No right to come in here and judge us, judge him. You don't know anything about our lives. I know he's hurting you. I know he's going to get caught eventually, and you and Tommy will be caught in the fallout. Better that than going back to the way we grew up." She shouted, "Eating store-brand cereal and wearing second-hand clothes and feeling ashamed every time someone asked where we lived. I will not let my son grow up like that. I'd rather have you alive." She stopped, staring at me. "I'd rather have you poor and safe than rich and dead," I said softly. "Because that's where this ends, Sarah. Men like Richard, they don't stop. Not until they're caught or until." I couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's face crumpled. She sank into a chair, sobbing into her hands. I went to her, wrapping my arms around my daughter the way I had when she was small. "I'm scared, Mom," she whispered. "I'm so scared all the time." "I know, baby. I know." Chapter 15. We sat at that kitchen counter for an hour, Sarah and I, planning in whispers. She told me things I didn't want to hear, how the violence had started small, just grabbing her arm too hard, pushing her against a wall. How it had escalated. How Richard controlled every penny, every decision. How isolated she'd become, cut off from old friends who weren't suitable for their new lifestyle. "The worst part," she said, her voice hollow, "is that I let it happen. I saw the signs. I wanted the dream so badly. The security. I thought I could manage it, manage him. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I chose him. I stayed. You were surviving. There's a difference." She wiped her eyes and looked at me. "What do we do now? If we go to the police, Richard will know it was us. He'll destroy everything. And without hard evidence." "I have evidence." I went to the guest room and retrieved my handbag, pulling out the reconstructed shredded documents. "And I took pictures of what was in the safe." Her eyes widened. "When?" "Last night. Before Richard found me." I'd been so frightened, my hands shaking as I snapped photos with my old phone. But I'd managed to get several clear shots of the passports, the cash, the documents. "He found you?" Sarah's face went white. "Mom, what did he say?" "He threatened to have me declared incompetent if I went to the police. He said you'd side with him." "I would have." She said it quietly, honestly. "Yesterday, I would have. I would have chosen the illusion of safety over the truth. She took my hand. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be ready. We need to do this today, before he has time to move everything. He's at work until 5. Then we call the police now. Sarah's hand trembled in mine. Once we do this, there's no going back. Our whole life. Everything falls apart. Or everything finally falls into place. I squeezed her hand. We'll survive this. Our family has survived worse. She took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay, let's do it. Chapter 16. The detective who arrived was a woman in her 50s, kind eyes, patient manner. Her name was Detective Anderson, and she listened to our story without interrupting, taking careful notes. Sarah showed her bruises, the fresh ones and the faded ones. I showed her the reconstructed documents and the photos from my phone. We told her about the safe, about Richard's threats, about Tommy's innocent color game. This is serious, Detective Anderson said when we'd finished. What you're describing is financial fraud on a significant scale, plus domestic violence. But I need to be honest with you, we'll need to move carefully. A man with resources like your husband has access to good lawyers. We need to build an airtight case. How long will that take? Sarah asked. I can't say for certain. But with what you've given me, I can get a warrant to search the premises and seize that safe. We can do it today, before he gets home. He'll know it was us, Sarah said. Yes, he will. Detective Anderson's expression was sympathetic but firm. Which is why I'm going to recommend you and your son go somewhere safe. Do you have family you can stay with? She can come home with me, I said. Both of them. Sarah looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw my daughter again. Not the polished, frightened woman in the expensive clothes, but the girl who used to believe in things, who used to laugh freely. Your house, she said softly. I haven't been there in almost a year. It's waiting for you. It's always been waiting. Chapter 17. Things moved quickly after that. Detective Anderson made calls. More officers arrived. They were professional, efficient, but gentle with us. With Tommy, especially, who woke up confused to find police officers in his home. Mommy? What's happening? Sarah knelt down and held him close. We're going on a trip, sweetheart. To Grandma's house. Right now? Right now. But what about Daddy? Sarah's face crumpled for just a moment, but she held it together. Daddy has some things he needs to take care of. It'll just be us for a while. I watched them gather a few belongings, clothes, Tommy's favorite toys, Sarah's documents. The officers were already photographing the safe, the study, everything. One of them was on the phone with what sounded like a financial crimes unit. Ma'am? A young officer approached me. Detective Anderson wanted me to tell you you did the right thing. A lot of people would have looked the other way. He's my grandson. She's my daughter. I couldn't look away. He nodded. My grandmother raised me after my mom fell into some trouble. Grandmothers are stronger than people think. Thank you, officer. By noon, we were driving away from that glass and steel building, heading back to my neighborhood. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, Tommy in the back with his stuffed rabbit, and none of us looked back. Chapter 18. My house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe it was just that we were all seeing it through different eyes. The paint was a little faded, the porch needed work, the garden was overgrown. But it was home. Tommy jumped out of the car, his earlier confusion forgotten in the excitement of adventure. Grandma, can I see my old room? Of course, sweetheart. He ran inside, and I heard his feet pounding up the stairs. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, just looking at the house. It's exactly the same, she said. Should I have changed it? No, She wiped at her eyes. I forgot how much I missed it. The smell of your lavender in the garden. The way the porch creaks. Real things. We went inside together. The house welcomed us back, warm afternoon light through lace curtains. The old furniture that had stories in every scratch and stain, Family photos on the walls showing the years of our lives. Not curated, not perfect, just real. Sarah ran her hand along the kitchen counter, the one with the stain that never came out. I was so ashamed of this house, she said quietly. I wanted so badly to be someone else, somewhere else. I thought that's what would make me happy. And now? Now I realize that I was happy here. I just didn't know it. She looked at me. How did you do it, Mom? Raise us alone, no money, no help. How did you stay so strong? I wasn't strong. I was terrified most of the time. But I had you and your brother, and that was enough. Love is enough, when everything else falls away. Tommy came thundering back downstairs. Grandma, my room still has my old drawings on the wall. I never took them down. Can we put up new ones? We can put up as many as you want. He grinned and ran off to find paper and crayons. Sarah watched him go, then turned to me. What happens now? She asked. Really? When Richard finds out, when the trial starts, if there is a trial, what happens to us? We survive. We rebuild. We remember who we are. I don't know who I am anymore. Yes, you do. I took her hands. You're Sarah, my brave, beautiful daughter. You're a mother who loves her son. You're a woman who was lost but found her way back. That's who you are. She broke down then, really broke down, sobbing in my arms the way she hadn't since she was a child. All the years of pretending, of holding together a life that was crumbling, of being afraid, it all came pouring out. And I held her, the way mothers do. The way my mother had held me through my own dark times. Chapter 19. The next few days were strange. Quiet. We existed in this suspended state, waiting for news from Detective Anderson, waiting to see what would happen. Richard called Sarah's phone 47 times that first day. She didn't answer. He sent texts, first angry, then pleading, then threatening. Detective Anderson advised her to save everything but not to respond. He doesn't have access to his accounts, the detective told us during one of her visits. We've frozen everything connected to the shell corporations. And the evidence from the safe. Sarah, your husband was involved in serious fraud. We're talking millions of dollars, multiple victims. This is going to be a major case. Will he go to prison? Sarah asked. If we can make all the charges stick? Yes. For a long time. Sarah nodded slowly. I couldn't read her expression. Even after everything, he'd been her husband. The father of her child. Some part of her had loved him once, or loved the man she'd thought he was. What about us? She asked. Will we be charged with anything? For not reporting it sooner? You were a victim of domestic violence living in fear. The DA isn't interested in prosecuting you. As for Margaret, Detective Anderson smiled at me. What you did was risky, but you brought us crucial evidence. No one's going to charge a grandmother for protecting her family. After she left, Sarah and I sat on the porch while Tommy played in the yard. The evening was warm, fireflies just beginning to appear. I keep thinking about the first time I met Richard, Sarah said. He seemed so perfect, so polished and confident. Everything I thought I wanted. You couldn't have known. But I ignored the signs. The way he talked about people, like they were assets or liabilities. The way he needed to control everything. I told myself it was just his business sense, his drive to succeed. She shook her head. I was so eager to believe the fairy tale. Most fairy tales have wolves in them somewhere. She laughed, a real laugh. When did you get so wise? Around the time I realized I couldn't protect you from everything. Only teach you to protect yourself. We sat in silence for a while, watching Tommy chase fireflies. I need to get a job, Sarah said eventually. Figure out how to support us. I haven't worked in 3 years. Richard didn't want me to. He said his wife didn't need to work. What do you want to do? I don't know. I used to know. Before Richard, I had plans. But I gave them all up. She looked at me. Is it too late to get them back? It's never too late. Even at 43? Even at 72? I smiled. We'll figure it out together. You can stay here as long as you need. This is your home. The house we were both so eager to leave. The house that was always waiting for you to come back. Chapter 20. The trial took 8 months to start. 8 months of depositions and lawyers and paperwork. 8 months of living in limbo, not quite able to move forward but no longer trapped in the past. Richard was denied bail, a flight risk, the judge said, given the multiple passports and offshore accounts. Sarah had to testify. So did I. It was grueling, being cross-examined by Richard's expensive lawyers, having them try to paint me as a meddling old woman and Sarah as a scorned wife. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documents, the photos, the testimony from Richard's victims, people he'd defrauded, businesses he'd destroyed. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sarah cried when the verdict was read, but I think they were tears of relief more than sadness. It's over, she whispered to me in the courthouse hallway. It's finally over. No, I said gently. It's finally beginning. Chapter 21. Tommy adjusted faster than any of us expected. Children are resilient that way. He missed his father at first, asked about him often. Sarah was honest with him, in age-appropriate ways. Daddy had done some wrong things. Daddy had to go away for a while. It was okay to miss him and be sad about it. But we're safe now? Tommy asked one night at bedtime. Yes, baby. We're safe. Good. I like being safe. I like being here with Grandma. He started doing better in school. The nightmares stopped. He made friends with the neighborhood kids, played outside until dark the way children should. He learned to ride a bike on the same street where Sarah had learned, a generation before. Sarah found work at a nonprofit that helped domestic violence survivors. She said it felt right, using her experience to help others. The pay wasn't much, but it was honest work that mattered. We settled into routines. Breakfast together every morning. Dinner around the old kitchen table every night. Homework at that table, with me helping with math while Sarah handled reading. Family movie nights on the worn couch. Simple things. Real things. One evening, about a year after that day Sarah and Tommy came home with me. I was washing dishes when Sarah came into the kitchen. Mom? I want to show you something. She pulled out her phone and opened a banking app. I've been saving. It's not much, but in another year, maybe 2, I'll have enough for a down payment on a small house. Something nearby. So Tommy can stay in his school, and I can still. She trailed off, and I saw what she was trying to say. You want to stay close. Is that okay? I know I ran so far away before. I know I was ashamed of this neighborhood, this life. But now. She looked around the kitchen, at the worn linoleum and the ancient appliances. Now I see what I couldn't see before. Home isn't about the size of the house or the price of the furniture. It's about the people in it. I dried my hands and hugged her. You can stay as long as you want. But I'm proud of you for wanting to build your own life again. I learned from the best. Chapter 22. 2 years after Richard went to prison, I was in the garden when I heard Tommy's voice calling me. Grandma, Grandma, come quick. I hurried inside, my heart jumping the way it always did when he called urgently. But he was smiling, bouncing on his toes with excitement. What is it? Mom got a call. She got the house. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, phone still in her hand, tears streaming down her face. We got approved. The loan went through. We're buying the little blue house on Maple Street. The little blue house, we'd looked at it together months ago. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, within walking distance. Nothing fancy, but charming and solid and real. Oh, sweetheart. I hugged her tight. I'm so happy for you. I couldn't have done this without you. Any of this. You did it yourself. I just reminded you who you were. We closed on the house 3 weeks later. Tommy got to pick the color for his room. He chose green. Sarah painted the kitchen yellow. I helped them move in, hang curtains, arrange furniture. It was a good house. You could feel it the moment you walked in: warmth, light, possibility. On their first night in the new house, Sarah invited me for dinner. We sat around their new table, secondhand, but sturdy, eating spaghetti and laughing about how Tommy had already managed to spill sauce on the fresh paint. "So," Sarah said, raising her water glass. "A toast. To new beginnings. To family," I added. "To Grandma," Tommy said, "for saving us." "I didn't save you," I told him. "You saved yourselves. I just believed you could." We clinked glasses, the three of us in that warm little house, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. The kind that comes from knowing your children are safe, are healing, are home. Epilogue. It's been 5 years now since that night I discovered the safe behind my photograph. 5 years since everything changed. Tommy is 11 now, growing tall and confident. He's on the soccer team. He still comes to visit me most weekends, still helps me in the garden. Sometimes he talks about his father. Richard writes letters from prison, and Sarah lets Tommy read them if he wants to. She doesn't hide the truth from him, but she doesn't poison him with bitterness either. "Your father made bad choices," she tells him. "That doesn't mean he didn't love you." People are complicated. Sarah is the director of the nonprofit now. She speaks at conferences, advocates for policy changes, helps other women find their way out of dark places. She's dating someone, a kind man, a teacher. They take things slow. She's learned to trust her own judgment again, but also to be patient with herself. As for me, I'm 77 now. My knees are worse, my eyes are weaker, but my heart is full. I look at my daughter, at my grandson, at the life they've built from the ashes of that other life, and I feel something I didn't feel for a long time. Hope. People ask me sometimes, friends, neighbors, even strangers who've heard our story, they ask if I was scared that night. When I opened that safe. When I confronted Richard. When I risked everything to expose the truth. And yes, I was terrified. But fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is being afraid and doing what's right anyway. Courage is an old woman standing up to a criminal because her family needed protecting. Courage is a battered wife finding the strength to walk away. Courage is a child learning to trust again after betrayal. We're all capable of more courage than we think. I keep that photograph now, the one of Tommy and me laughing. It hangs in my living room, no longer hiding any secrets. Just showing a moment of pure joy, a grandmother and her grandson, their faces bright with love. That's the real treasure that was hidden behind the picture. Not the crimes, not the fraud, not the money. The treasure was always family. Was always love. Was always the courage to choose truth over comfort, safety over status, warmth over wealth. And that treasure? That one's worth protecting. That one's worth everything. Thank you for listening to this story. If it reminded you that it's never too late to protect the ones you love, that wisdom and courage have no age limit, or that true wealth is measured in family and dignity, not in marble floors and expensive furniture, then please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they're stronger than they think, that speaking up matters. Or that home isn't about perfection, it's about love and truth. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Until next time, remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to look away.